I still remember the exact shade of crimson my cheeks turned that day in the conference room. The memory burns like acid, their laughter echoing in my ears even now. A productivity app that actually makes people more productive? Please, Cassandra. That market is saturated. Nobody needs another to-do list. More laughter, more dismissive glances. I clutched my presentation materials tighter. Knuckles white, as my brilliant idea, my baby, was torn to shreds by the executive team at Pinova Solutions. That was 18 months ago. Today, as I sit in my sleek downtown office overlooking the city, watching my company's valuation soar past $100 million, I can't help but smile. They're not laughing anymore. My name is Cassandra Reynolds, and this is the story of how I turned humiliation into the sweetest revenge the corporate world has ever tasted. I'd been at Pinova for nearly 5 years when everything fell apart. A mid-sized tech consultancy with about 200 employees. Pinova had built its reputation on being innovative and forward-thinking. At least, that's what the company website claimed. The reality was quite different. Behind the colorful open-concept office and free snack bar lurked a toxic culture of backstabbing, idea theft, and rampant favoritism. Despite this, I had managed to climb from junior developer to project manager through sheer determination and consistent results. My clients loved me. My teams respected me. I had plans to keep rising. That is, until Richard Blackwood was hired as our new Chief Innovation Officer. Richard was everything Silicon Valley claims to hate but secretly worships. A middle-aged white man with an MBA from Harvard, connections in all the right places, and the uncanny ability to take credit for other people's work. From the day he started, Richard had his sights set on becoming CEO, and somehow, he'd decided I was a threat. It began subtly. My emails went, accidentally, unread. My project proposals were perpetually under review. My teams were reassigned to other managers for strategic realignment. Then came the meeting that would change everything. I had spent months developing a concept for a revolutionary productivity application. Not just another to-do list or time tracker, this was different. Drawing on cognitive psychology and behavioral economics, I designed an adaptive system that actually learned from users' work patterns and psychological profiles, then created personalized productivity flows that worked with their natural tendencies rather than against them. I called it Synapse. The concept was solid. The preliminary market research was promising. I had even built a working prototype on my own time. All I needed was Pinova's resources to develop it properly. In a company that prided itself on innovation, this should have been a slam dunk. I requested time at the quarterly innovation review, where project proposals were evaluated for potential company investment. Richard would be there, of course, along with the executive team and various department heads. I prepared meticulously, rehearsing until every word flowed perfectly, anticipating every possible question. The day arrived. I wore my power suit, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, a splash of color from my emerald blouse, comfortable yet professional heels. I felt confident. Prepared. I had this. The first sign of trouble came when I walked into the conference room and saw the seating arrangement. I'd been placed at the far end of the table, practically in another zip code from the projector and whiteboard. Richard sat at CEO Marcus Bennett's right hand, leaning in close, both of them chuckling about something. I took my seat and waded through 3 other presentations, all from Richard's direct reports, all met with enthusiastic nodding and supportive questions. Then it was my turn. Next up, Marcus announced, glancing at the agenda. Cassandra Reynolds with something called Synapse. The way he said it, like it was some alien concept he couldn't quite pronounce, sent the first chill down my spine. I stood, squared my shoulders, and moved to the presentation area. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm excited to share a concept that I believe represents the future of productivity software. I launched into my presentation, explaining the problems with current productivity apps, detailing my solution. Walking through the prototype's key features, for the first few minutes, the room was attentive, if not exactly enthusiastic. Then I noticed Richard checking his phone under the table. A moment later, Marcus did the same. Then the CFO, Janet Pierce. Within 5 minutes, half the room was disengaged. Still, I pressed on, reaching the section on market potential. Based on preliminary research, I estimate a potential user base of... Richard cleared his throat loudly. Cassandra, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we need to address the elephant in the room. My presentation faltered. I'm sorry? This concept. He gestured vaguely toward the screen. It's essentially just another productivity app in a market that's already oversaturated with similar products. Actually, if you'll let me explain the differentiation, we all know how these things work, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. Users download it, play with it for a week, then abandon it like every other productivity solution they've tried. The behavioral science behind Synapse specifically addresses app abandonment by... Marcus jumped in now. Richard makes a good point, Cassandra. What's really new here? As I was explaining, the adaptive algorithm... Janet Pierce tapped her pen on the table. I'm concerned about development costs. This sounds like a significant investment for an unproven concept in a crowded market. They weren't even letting me finish a sentence. Each objection was followed by knowing glances between Richard and the others. This wasn't a fair evaluation. It was an ambush. If you just look at the prototype data... I tried again. Then it happened. Richard gave a short, dismissive laugh. I think we've seen enough productivity apps come and go to recognize when something isn't bringing anything new to the table. Someone else chuckled. Then another. Soon, a wave of polite but unmistakable laughter rippled through the room. They weren't just rejecting my idea, they were mocking it, mocking me. I stood there, my carefully prepared presentation only half delivered, watching months of work and a genuinely innovative idea being laughed away. My face burned, my throat closed, but I refused to let them see me break. Thank you for your time, I said, my voice impressively steady given the circumstances. I gathered my materials and returned to my seat, sitting through the rest of the meeting in a haze of humiliation and rage. Afterward, Richard approached me in the hallway, his face a mask of fake concern. Don't take it personally, Cassandra. Not every idea can be a winner. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. Maybe focus on your project management duties for now. That seems more your speed. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and walked away. In that moment, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about a rejected proposal. This was about a system designed to keep people like Richard in power and people like me, regardless of talent or ideas, firmly in our place. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to friends. I didn't update my resume. Instead, I opened my laptop and began working on Synapse again. If Pinova wouldn't back my vision, I would find another way. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Marcus. When I walked into his office, he looked surprised. He'd clearly expected me to be licking my wounds, not scheduling FaceTime with the CEO. Cassandra, what can I do for you? He asked, not bothering to look up from his computer. I'd like to discuss the intellectual property rights for Synapse. That got his attention. His head snapped up. Excuse me? Synapse. The productivity application concept I presented yesterday. I developed it entirely on my own time, using my own resources. I've reviewed my employment contract, and as the company has officially declined to pursue the project, I believe the IP rights revert to me as the creator. Marcus's expression darkened. That's not how this works, Cassandra. Any ideas developed while you're employed here belong to Pinova. I placed a folder on his desk. Actually, Section 7.3 of my employment agreement specifically states that intellectual property created without company resources and outside of work hours remains the property of the employee unless the company chooses to exercise its right of first refusal by formally adopting the project. I tapped the folder. You'll find the relevant contract language highlighted, along with documentation proving I developed Synapse on my personal time. Yesterday's meeting constitutes a formal rejection, which releases the IP back to me. His face reddened. This is absurd. Our legal team will. Your legal team will confirm what I'm saying is accurate, I interrupted calmly. I've already consulted with an attorney who specializes in intellectual property law. I'm not here to ask permission. Marcus, I'm here as a professional courtesy to inform you that I'll be pursuing Synapse independently. Are you threatening to compete with Pinova? I smiled. Not at all. As yesterday's meeting made abundantly clear, you don't consider Synapse viable or innovative. So there's no competition issue, is there? Marcus stood, his imposing frame meant to intimidate. I think you're forgetting who signs your paychecks? Cassandra? Actually, I'm very clear on that point. I stood as well, refusing to be physically dominated. Which is why I'm also submitting my 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. I placed another envelope on his desk. I've already briefed my team leads on all active projects and prepared transition documents. The shock on his face was almost worth the previous day's humiliation. Almost. You're making a huge mistake, he sputtered. Richard was right about you. Too emotional, too impulsive for leadership. I simply nodded. We'll see. Thank you for the opportunities Pinova has provided. I'll make sure all my responsibilities are properly handed off before I leave. As I turned to go, Marcus called after me. No one will fund your little app, Cassandra. You're nothing without Pinova's resources and connections. I paused at the door. Thank you for the feedback, Marcus. I'll be sure to keep that in mind. 2 weeks later, I walked out of Pinova's glass doors for the last time. No farewell party, no good luck card signed by colleagues. My departure was treated like an embarrassing family secret, acknowledged only in whispers and quickly forgotten. But I wasn't forgotten. Not by a long shot. The first month after leaving was brutal. I moved out of my comfortable apartment into a much smaller place to cut expenses. I lived on ramen and coffee, working 18-hour days refining Synapse's code and business plan. I reached out to every contact I had in the tech world, seeking advice, connections, anything that might help launch my vision. Most doors remained firmly closed. Pinova was well connected, and word had spread that I was difficult and unrealistic. Several potential investors declined meetings after hearing concerns about my project and professionalism. Richard's influence, it seemed, extended well beyond Pinova's walls. Just as my savings were dwindling to dangerous levels, I received an email from Diane Mercer, a former client I'd worked with at Pinova. She was now at Accelerate Ventures, a boutique venture capital firm specializing in early-stage startups. I always thought Pinova undervalued you. Her message read, I'd like to hear more about what you're working on now. Coffee this week. That coffee meeting turned into a 3-hour deep dive into Synapse. Unlike the executives at Pinova, Diane asked thoughtful questions, challenged my assumptions in constructive ways, and actually listened to my responses. By the end of our conversation, she was visibly excited. This is exactly the kind of innovation we look for, she said. Not another copycat product, but something that fundamentally rethinks how technology can serve users. Can you put together a formal pitch for our investment committee next week? 7 days later, I walked out of Accelerate Ventures with a seed investment of $750,000 and something even more valuable, validation from industry experts who actually understood what I was building. With funding secured, I could finally start building Synapse properly. I rented a small office space and began recruiting a team. My first hire was Jamie Morris, a brilliant UX designer I'd worked with at Pinova who had also grown disillusioned with the company's direction. Next came Zoe Washington, a data scientist whose innovative work had been repeatedly sidelined by, surprise, Richard Blackwood. Within 3 months, our team had grown to 8 people, all driven by the shared vision of creating something truly revolutionary. We worked insane hours, fueled by passion and a collective desire to prove our former employer wrong. The office became our second home, whiteboards covered in diagrams and user flows, takeout containers from every restaurant within delivery distance, the constant hum of collaboration and creation. The development process wasn't smooth. We hit technical roadblocks that sometimes took weeks to solve. Our initial user testing revealed flaws in our interface that required significant redesign. There were heated arguments about features and priorities, more than once. I found myself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. But we persevered. Every problem solved made the product stronger. Every user test refined our understanding of what people truly needed. 6 months after securing funding, we had a beta version ready for limited release. We selected 500 users across various industries and work styles to test Synapse in real-world conditions. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with 87% reporting significant improvements in their productivity and work satisfaction. More importantly, our retention rate was exceptional. 94% of users were still actively using the app after 30 days, far above the industry average. Armed with this data, we approached Accelerate Ventures for our Series A funding round. Diane, who had become something of a mentor, brought in additional investors from her network. We secured $4.2 million to scale our operation and prepare for public launch. As our launch date approached, I decided it was time to let Pinova know what was coming, not out of any legal obligation, but because I wanted them to see exactly what they had dismissed so casually. I sent personalized invitations to Marcus, Richard, and the entire executive team for our launch event. The message was simple: Synapse is launching next month. I thought you might be interested to see how it turned out. Your feedback was invaluable to the development process. Only Janet Pierce, the CFO, bothered to respond. A terse congratulations and good luck that somehow managed to sound both dismissive and condescending. Perfect. They still didn't take me seriously. On launch day, we held an event at a trendy tech venue downtown. Industry analysts, tech journalists, potential enterprise clients, and influencers in the productivity space filled the room. I took the stage, heart pounding but voice steady, and told the story of Synapse, though I carefully omitted any specific mention of Pinova or my humiliation there. Traditional productivity tools try to force users into rigid systems that don't account for individual differences in how we work and think. I explained to the attentive crowd, Synapse takes the opposite approach. It learns from you and adapts to your natural workflow, enhancing your productivity by working with your brain's patterns rather than against them. I demonstrated the core features: the adaptive interface that evolved based on usage patterns, the personalized productivity insights powered by behavioral science, the seamless integration with existing tools and workflows. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions and nodding appreciatively. After the formal presentation, as people mingled and tested Synapse on demo stations around the venue, I spotted a familiar face near the bar, Janet Pierce, Pinova's CFO. She wasn't looking at me, but rather staring intently at one of our demo stations, where a young product manager was showing off Synapse's enterprise features. I walked over, champagne flute in hand. Janet, I'm glad you could make it. She turned, startled. Cassandra, congratulations on the launch. It's impressive. Thank you. I'm curious. What do you think of the actual product now that you've seen it in action? Janet hesitated, conflict evident on her face. Professional courtesy battling with corporate loyalty. It's certainly more developed than what you presented at Pinova. The concept is exactly the same, I replied evenly. The only difference is that now it's been built and validated by the market. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. Yes, well, hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? In any case, I wish you success. That's generous of you. How are things at Pinova? I hear Richard's productivity initiative hasn't quite lived up to expectations. Janet's eyes widened slightly. Where did you hear that? I smiled. The tech community is smaller than people think. Word gets around. The truth was that several former colleagues had kept me informed about Pinova's activities. After my departure, Richard had announced his own productivity solution, a pale imitation of some basic concepts from Synapse, hastily cobbled together to save face. It had been rushed to market without proper testing and was failing spectacularly with clients. Before Janet could respond, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down to see a message from Jamie. TechCrunch just dropped their review. 5 stars. They're calling it revolutionary. I looked back at Janet, unable to suppress a genuine smile. Duty calls. Please give my regards to Marcus and Richard. As I walked away, I heard Janet's phone ring. I didn't need to overhear her conversation to know what was happening. Word was spreading, Synapse was making waves, and Pinova was finally realizing what they had lost. The launch exceeded our wildest expectations. Downloads in the first week surpassed our quarterly projections. Tech publications ran glowing reviews. Productivity experts were creating content about Synapse strategies and tips. Enterprise inquiries flooded our sales team's inbox. And then came the email that truly signaled our arrival. A meeting request from TechForward, the industry's premier conference for innovative software solutions. They wanted Synapse to be featured in their Next Big Thing showcase, a platform reserved for the most promising new technologies. I forwarded the email to our now 15-person team with a simple message. We're just getting started. 3 months after launch, Synapse had over 500,000 active users and was growing by approximately 50,000 new users each week. Our premium conversion rate, the percentage of free users upgrading to paid plans, was double the industry standard. Enterprise deals were closing at an accelerating pace as major companies saw the productivity gains Synapse could provide their workforce. We moved to a larger office, hired more staff, and began planning our next round of features based on user feedback and usage data. Investors were already approaching us about Series B funding, impressed by our growth metrics and retention rates. Then came the call that changed everything again. Cassandra Reynolds? The voice on the phone was unfamiliar. Yes, this is she. This is Alex Reeves, senior editor at Business Innovator magazine. We're doing our annual 30 Under 30s feature on rising entrepreneurs. And your name keeps coming up. I'd love to schedule an interview. Business Innovator was one of the most respected publications in the tech and business world. Their 30 Under 30 list was prestigious, a kingmaker that opened doors throughout the industry. Being featured would catapult Synapse and me to a new level of visibility. I'd be honored, I replied, trying to sound professionally pleased rather than ecstatically vindicated. The interview took place the following week at our office. Alex was thorough, asking about my background, my vision for Synapse, and our growth strategy. Then came the question I'd been anticipating. I understand you developed this concept while working at Pinova Solutions, but they declined to pursue it. Can you tell me more about that experience and how it led to founding your own company? Here it was, my chance for public revenge. I could tell the world how Richard Blackwood and Marcus Bennett had laughed at my idea, how they'd tried to keep me in my place, how they'd attempted to block my progress even after I left. The story would make compelling copy, painting them as short-sighted villains and me as the underdog hero. But as I opened my mouth to speak, I realized something important. True revenge wasn't about public humiliation or settling scores. It was about success, undeniable, irrefutable success that spoke for itself. The path from concept to successful product is rarely straightforward, I said carefully. While Pinova ultimately decided not to pursue Synapse, that decision created the opportunity for me to build something truly independent, without corporate constraints. Everything that's happened since then has confirmed that this was the right path, not just for the product, but for me personally. Alex looked slightly disappointed at my diplomatic answer. So there was no conflict over your departure or the intellectual property? There were some initial discussions about IP rights, but we resolved those professionally. I prefer to focus on what we're building now rather than past disagreements. The interview continued, but I could tell Alex was hoping for juicier details about corporate drama. Too bad. I didn't need to trash Pinova publicly. Our success was making the point far more effectively than any bitter comments could. When the Business Innovator issue hit newsstands a month later, I was featured prominently, with Synapse described as the rare app that actually delivers on its promise to transform how we work. The article mentioned my time at Pinova only briefly, noting that Reynolds developed the initial concept while working as a project manager at Pinova Solutions before leaving to found her own company after the larger firm opted not to pursue the project. Understated, factual, and devastating in its implication of Pinova's missed opportunity. The impact was immediate. Our user growth accelerated. Recruitment became easier as top talent sought us out. My calendar filled with speaking invitations and requests for advisor roles from other startups. Then came the call I'd been secretly waiting for. Cassandra. It's Diane. Do you have a minute? Something interesting has come up. Of course. What's going on? I just got off the phone with Janet Pierce from Pinova. They're interested in exploring acquisition possibilities for Synapse. My heart skipped. Are they really? Very interested, from what I can tell. She mentioned a preliminary valuation in the $85,100 million range, contingent on due diligence. Of course. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Pinova wanted to buy the very product they had laughed out of their conference room. The irony was delicious. What did you tell her? I asked. That we would discuss it with you and get back to them. This is your call, Cassandra. An exit at that valuation would be exceptional for a company at your stage. The investors would be thrilled. But I know there's history there, so it's complicated. I finished for her. Exactly. Take some time to think about it. No rush. But I didn't need time. I already knew my answer. Can you set up a meeting? I want to hear their pitch directly. 3 days later, I walked into Pinova's headquarters for the first time since my departure. The security guard did a double take when I gave my name, then directed me to the executive conference room. The same room where my humiliation had taken place 18 months earlier. Janet Pierce greeted me in the lobby. Cassandra, thank you for coming. Marcus and Richard are already upstairs. Perfect, I said, smoothing my designer suit. A far cry from the off-the-rack outfit I'd worn to my last presentation here. Let's not keep them waiting. As we rode the elevator, Janet attempted small talk about Synapse's impressive growth. I responded politely but briefly. I wasn't here for pleasantries. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, I felt a momentary flash of my old anxiety, the lingering trauma of that awful day. I took a deep breath and pushed it aside. I wasn't the same person who had walked these halls before. I was Cassandra Reynolds, founder and CEO of the fastest-growing productivity app on the market. I belonged in any room I chose to enter. Marcus and Richard stood as we entered the conference room. Marcus forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cassandra, thank you for making time to meet with us. You've been busy, I see. Richard couldn't quite manage even a fake smile. He nodded stiffly, his discomfort palpable. It's my pleasure, I replied, taking a seat directly across from them. I understand you're interested in discussing an acquisition? Marcus launched into a carefully crafted speech about synergies and market consolidation, about how Synapse would complement Pinova's existing product suite, about the benefits of having Pinova's resources behind the app's continued development. I listened attentively, noting how he never once acknowledged that this was the same concept they had rejected, never mentioned the humiliating meeting in this very room. In his revised history, Synapse was simply an exciting new product that had emerged on the market, unconnected to Pinova's past decisions. When he finished, I smiled pleasantly. That's a compelling vision. Marcus, before we discuss details, I'm curious. What changed your mind about Synapse's market potential? The question hung in the air, its implication unmistakable. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Richard stared at the table. Janet cleared her throat. Market validation is powerful evidence. Your user growth and retention metrics speak for themselves. They do, I agreed. The same metrics I projected in my original presentation, if I recall correctly. Richard finally spoke, his tone carefully controlled. The concept has obviously been significantly developed since your initial proposal. The core concept is identical. I corrected him gently. The execution has certainly advanced, but that's what happens when you actually build something instead of dismissing it with laughter. Marcus intervened, clearly eager to move past this uncomfortable territory. What's important is where we go from here. Our initial offer would be $90 million, with you staying on to lead Synapse as a division of Pinova for at least 2 years. I raised an eyebrow. And reporting to whom, exactly? Well, as Chief Innovation Officer, Richard would. No, I interrupted calmly. That won't work. Marcus blinked, taken aback. I'm sorry? I said no. Marcus, I won't work under Richard. If acquisition is contingent on my continued leadership, which I assume it is, given how central I am to the product vision and team cohesion, then I would need to report directly to you, with complete autonomy over Synapse's development and strategy. Richard's face flushed red. That's completely unreasonable. All division heads report through the appropriate executive structure. I shrugged. Then I'm afraid we don't have anything further to discuss. Now wait a minute. Marcus interjected. Let's not be hasty. Perhaps we can find a compromise. I'm not interested in compromise on this point. Either Synapse operates as an independent division under my leadership, reporting directly to the CEO, or there's no deal. Janet, ever the pragmatist, jumped in. What if we created a new position, Chief Product Officer, perhaps, at the executive level, reporting to Marcus? I pretended to consider this. That might be workable, depending on the scope of authority and the compensation package. What followed was 2 hours of intense negotiation. By the end, we had outlined a deal structure. $110 million acquisition price, a significant increase from their initial offer. A new C-suite position for me, complete autonomy for the Synapse team, and a substantial retention bonus structure for my key employees. As we wrapped up, I had one final stipulation. I want a formal announcement to all Pinova employees about the acquisition, specifically mentioning that Synapse was originally conceived during my time here. Marcus frowned. Is that really necessary? It is to me. He sighed. Fine. We can include that in the communication. We stood, preparing to leave. I extended my hand to Marcus, then Janet, then finally to Richard. As he reluctantly took my hand, I held his gaze. I'm looking forward to working together again. Richard, I have so many ideas I can't wait to share with the executive team. The flash of panic in his eyes was worth every moment of humiliation I had endured. The deal closed 6 weeks later, after extensive due diligence and legal review. On my first day back at Pinova, now as Chief Product Officer and a member of the executive leadership team, I walked through the lobby with a sense of triumphant déjà vu. The company-wide email had gone out that morning, announcing the acquisition and my new role, explicitly stating that Synapse was originally conceived by Cassandra during her previous tenure at Pinova. The responses flooded in, congratulations from old colleagues, surprised messages from those who remembered my abrupt departure, meeting requests from department heads eager to align with the company's hot new product line. My new office was on the executive floor, directly across from Richard's. Through my glass door, I could see a stream of employees stopping by his office, then being redirected to mine. The power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. My assistant, yes, I had an assistant now, knocked lightly on my door. Ms. Reynolds, the CEO would like to see you when you have a moment. Thank you. I'll head there now. Marcus was reviewing documents when I entered his office, but he quickly set them aside. Cassandra, please, have a seat. How does it feel to be back? Different, I answered honestly. But good. He nodded. I wanted to discuss the quarterly executive retreat next month. As our newest executive team member, we'd like you to present the vision for Synapse's integration and future development. I'd be happy to. Excellent. He hesitated. The presentation will be in the main conference room downstairs. The same room. Of course it was. Perfect, I said with a genuine smile. I know that room well. As I stood to leave, Marcus called after me. Cassandra? I turned. Yes? For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. We all were. I considered his words. this belated acknowledgement of their mistake. It wasn't quite an apology, but perhaps it was as close as someone like Marcus could come. Thank you for saying that, Marcus. But honestly, it worked out for the best. Sometimes rejection is just redirection to something better. I walked back to my office, nodding to Richard as I passed his door. He quickly looked away, suddenly very interested in his computer screen. That afternoon, I gathered my original Synapse team, all now Pinova employees with generous compensation packages, in my new conference room. They looked uneasy, uncertain about their place in this corporate environment that had once rejected their leader. I know this is a big change, I told them, but I want you all to remember something important. We're not here because we needed Pinova. We're here because Pinova needed us. They need our innovation, our vision, our creativity. We're going to continue building amazing things, just with more resources at our disposal. Jamie raised her hand. What about the culture issues you told us about, the politics and backstabbing? I smiled. Culture flows from leadership. As executives, we now have the power to change that culture. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Over the next year, Synapse's user base tripled. We expanded into enterprise solutions, educational applications, and even therapeutic tools for cognitive rehabilitation. My team grew from 15 to over 100. Our office space took over an entire floor of Pinova's headquarters. Richard eventually left to pursue other opportunities. A graceful exit arranged after several of his pet projects failed spectacularly and his position became increasingly marginalized. I didn't push for his removal. I didn't have to. His own inadequacies did that work for me. On the anniversary of the acquisition, I received a small package from Diane Mercer. Inside was a beautiful fountain pen with an engraved quote, "Success is the best revenge." I smiled as I placed it on my desk, then turned to my computer to finish the presentation I was preparing for next week's industry conference. The title slide read, Beyond Productivity: How Synapse is Reimagining Work Itself. As I reviewed my notes, an email notification appeared in the corner of my screen. It was from a junior developer on one of Pinova's legacy teams, requesting time to discuss an idea she'd been developing on her own time. Something about revolutionizing project management through emotional intelligence algorithms. I immediately sent a response. I'd love to hear about your concept. How's tomorrow at 10 a.m. in my office? The cycle continues. But this time, no good idea would be laughed out of the room. This time, innovation would be recognized and nurtured. This time would be different. Because this time, I was the one in power, and I would never forget what it felt like to be the one without it.